She was 19 years old, standing 2 feet from the man who was hunting the saboteur, and the weapon he was looking for was hidden under her thumbnail. But to understand how a mechanic's daughter brought a weapons factory to its knees, without anyone ever suspecting her, we need to go back to Budapest, to a garage, and a father who taught her that anything built by human hands can be taken apart by human hands. Budapest, 1942. Anna Horvath was 17 years old and already knew more about engines than half the mechanics on her street. Her father, Tibor, ran a repair shop on the east side of the city. Small place, concrete floor, oil stains, the smell of gasoline and metal that never quite washed off your skin. Anna's mother died giving birth to her. So Tibor raised his daughter the only way he knew how, between crankshafts and carburetors, between wrenches thrown across the room and caught without looking. She could strip a motor blindfolded by the time she was 14. By 17, she could disassemble a pocket watch in 90 seconds and put it back together with her eyes closed. Her father once told her, "Everything built by human hands has a weakness. Find the weakness, and you own the machine." He meant it as engineering advice. He had no idea he was training a saboteur. 1943. Her father was arrested for hiding a Jewish neighbor in the back of the shop. Anna never saw him again. 2 weeks later, she was loaded onto a cattle train with 200 other Hungarian women. Destination: a munitions factory in the Austrian Alps. The train was meant for livestock. The ride took 3 days. When the doors opened, Anna stepped out into white mountain light and saw a weapons complex the size of a small city, guard towers, smokestacks, a fence that went on forever. Inside, the factory floor stretched out like a cathedral of steel. Rows of workstations, conveyor belts, rifles in every stage of assembly. The Karabiner 98K, the standard issue rifle of the German army. A foreman screamed, "You are positions 14 through 18. Learn in 2 days, or we replace you." Anna learned in 2 hours, because the moment she saw that assembly line, she understood it. Every gear, every spring, every tolerance. She'd spent her whole life learning how machines worked, and now, standing in the center of the Nazi war machine, she understood something else. She knew how to break it. She spent weeks watching every station, every step. 30 positions on the assembly line, each one adding a piece to the rifle. Her position, number 14, installed the striker spring, and that's where Anna found the weakness her father taught her to look for. The striker spring had a tolerance of 0.3 millimeters, a gap so small you couldn't see it with the naked eye. But if you tilted that spring just a fraction to the left, the striker would accumulate micro-friction with every shot. For the first 10 rounds, perfect. For the first 50, still fine. But somewhere between round 50 and 80, the rifle would start to jam. By round 100, it was useless. And the factory's quality test, 10 rounds per sample, they would never catch it. Anna made her tool from a fragment of scrap metal. She filed it into a hook no bigger than a grain of rice and hid it under her thumbnail. It looked like dirt. The first time she used it, her hands were shaking. A half-second twist. That's all it took. The spring shifted. The rifle moved on. It passed quality control. It passed the 10-round test. It was packed and shipped to the Eastern Front. Anna didn't know if it worked. Not yet. Not until weeks later, when she overheard 2 guards laughing in the canteen. The Russians claim our rifles are jamming. Soviet propaganda, of course. Anna chewed her black bread, said nothing, showed nothing, but she knew. And then something changed. That evening, the chief engineer, Herr Schumann, appeared in the barracks, announced a new protocol. Quality tests would now fire 20 rounds per sample, not 10. Anna did the math in the dark. 20 rounds was still safe. The failures started at 50, but the margin had just gotten thinner. But Anna had a problem. She was one woman, one position out of 30 on the line. Most of the rifles left the factory untouched. She needed more hands. The first recruit was Dora, a Czech watchmaker assigned to position 17, quiet, angry. She'd lost her family at the border and hadn't smiled in months. Anna couldn't just ask her. One wrong word to the wrong person, and everyone dies. So she watched. For weeks, she watched Dora's hands. The way she handled the parts, precise, controlled. A watchmaker's instinct. One night, in the dark, Anna placed a screw in Dora's palm and whispered, "Turn it, just barely, like you're winding a watch that's already wound." Dora didn't ask why. She practiced for 2 weeks, in the dark, under blankets, with stolen screws. No light, no sound, just muscle memory building in her fingertips. On the day Dora made her first sabotage, Anna stood 3 positions away and coughed to cover any noise. There was no noise. Dora was perfect. "Watchmaker's hands," Anna said that night. Dora smiled, the first time in months. Within 3 months, the network was 7. 7 women, 7 positions out of 30. Every 4th rifle that left the factory was now compromised. But what Anna couldn't control was the other end. Field reports started arriving from the Eastern Front, from North Africa, from occupied France. Rifles jamming in combat, soldiers dying with useless weapons in their hands. Herr Schumann, the chief engineer, was a perfectionist, and perfectionists don't handle failure well. He called his engineers, demanded answers. They analyzed every step of the process, every alloy, every supplier, every batch of steel. Their conclusion? Metallurgical defect, faulty steel from the Czech supplier. Schumann replaced the supplier. The failures continued. He replaced the next one. They continued. And then Schumann did something that made Anna's stomach drop. He started walking the assembly line, slowly, with a magnifying glass. He stopped behind workers at random, leaned in, watched their hands. One afternoon, he stopped behind Anna. She felt his breath on the back of her neck. Her hands kept moving. Not a tremor, not a hesitation. 14 months of practice had made the motion invisible. He watched her for 5 seconds, then moved on. But what Anna didn't know, what none of them knew, was that a junior engineer had already raised the question no one wanted to hear. What if the problem isn't the material? What if it's human? Schumann laughed. These women can barely read. They don't understand what they're building. The woman who understood that machine better than anyone in the building was the one destroying it, and he couldn't see it because he couldn't imagine it. And then, on a Tuesday night in November, they came for Dora, not for the sabotage, for stealing bread from the officer's kitchen. But the interrogation wouldn't stop at bread. Anna lay in her bunk and listened. Through the wall, sounds she would carry for the rest of her life, not the screams. The silence between them, the silence that meant they were asking another question. Dora knew everything, the method, the tool, the names, all 7 positions. If she talked, 7 women would be dead by morning. The other 5 lay awake. They looked at Anna. No one said a word, but the question was in their eyes. What do we do? Anna had no answer. The hours passed. The sound stopped, and the silence that followed was worse, because silence could mean anything. Morning. Anna was summoned to Schumann's office. She walked across the courtyard in gray light. A 19-year-old girl walking toward a man whose entire job was to find the person she was. The office was cold. Steel desk, no decoration. Schumann sat behind it, hands folded, round spectacles catching the overhead light. He looked at her the way an engineer looks at a problem. "Your name is Anna, position 14. "Yes, sir." "You knew the worker, Dora?" "She slept in the bunk beside mine." "Did she ever mention irregularities on the line?" Anna breathed. "Dora talked about food, sir, always about food. She was very hungry." Schumann watched her for 10 seconds, the longest 10 seconds of her life. "Go back to work." Anna walked out, down the corridor, past the yard, past Dora's bunk. There was dried blood on the pillow. Dora never came back. She never talked either. 7 names, 7 positions, 7 lives. Dora took them all to the ground with her and gave nothing. After Dora, Anna shut the network down. 3 weeks. No sabotage, no signals, nothing. She needed to know if Schumann had connected Dora to the line. if the investigation had moved past bread and into something worse. So she watched, the way she always did. She watched Schumann's face at inspections. She watched the guards' routines. She watched for any sign that they were closing in. Nothing changed. Schumann filed his report. Dora was a thief, an isolated case. The field failures remained, in his words, a structural supply chain deficiency. He never looked at the women on the line, not once. Anna reactivated the network, but now they were 6. Dora's position, 17, was empty, and Anna needed it filled. The replacement was Kasia, a 16-year-old Polish girl assigned to position 22. She'd lost both brothers in the first year of the war. She didn't talk much, but when Anna placed the screw in her palm that first night, Kasia didn't hesitate. She turned it on the first try. Some people are born with steady hands. Kasia was born with steady everything. In the final months of the war, the factory went into overdrive. 16-hour shifts, double production quotas. The German army was hemorrhaging on every front, and Schumann had one order from Berlin: every rifle counts. Every rifle counts. Anna heard that phrase and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not fear, not grief, purpose. The network operated at maximum speed. 6 women, 6 positions, 16 hours a day. Their hands were raw. Their eyes burned from the overhead lights. But every 4th rifle that rolled off the line carried a death sentence built into its spring. And no one knew. In the final weeks, you could hear the explosions. Distant at first, like thunder in the wrong season, then closer. The Allied advance was coming. Schumann ordered production around the clock, 3 shifts, no breaks. He paced the floor himself now, sleepless, barking at engineers, checking output numbers every hour. Anna sabotaged more rifles in those last 30 days than in any month before. And then, one morning in April, the machine stopped. Not because Schumann ordered it, because there was no more power. The Allies had taken the grid. The guards disappeared first, then the engineers, then Schumann himself, gone before dawn, like he'd never existed. When American troops walked through the factory gates, they found 2,000 workers standing in the yard, blinking in the sunlight, some crying, most just standing there, not sure what to do with freedom after forgetting what it felt like. Anna was among them. The American engineers who inspected the factory couldn't explain what they found. More than 30% of the rifles from the last production run were unusable. Firing mechanisms jammed, striker assemblies misaligned. They wrote it off as wartime deterioration, poor materials, failing infrastructure. They never asked the women. Anna walked out of the factory carrying nothing. No papers, no belongings. Just the clothes she'd worn for 2 years, and a sliver of metal still lodged under her thumbnail. She stopped at the gate, looked back at the building one last time. Then she pulled the fragment from under her nail and dropped it in the dirt. It had been there for 730 days. The numbers were reconstructed after the war. Position 14 processed approximately 12,000 rifles in 2 years. With the 6 additional positions, estimates suggest that somewhere between 18 and 20,000 rifles were compromised. The exact number is impossible to confirm. But what the records do show is this. Field reports from the German army documented abnormal weapon failure rates across multiple fronts. Infantry units reported rifles jamming at critical moments. Some soldiers died holding weapons that refused to fire. The factory's internal investigation never identified the cause. The final report concluded, and this is the part that still echoes, structural deficiency in the supply chain. They blamed their own engineers. They never even considered the women. Anna went home to Budapest. The garage was destroyed, bombed in the final months of the war. The roof was gone. The walls were cracked. The workbench where she'd taken apart pocket watches was buried under rubble. She rebuilt it herself. Same tools, same concrete floor. She worked as a mechanic for 40 years, fixed cars, trucks, tractors, anything with an engine. The neighbors knew her as the quiet woman with grease on her hands who never talked about the war. She never told anyone, not until the 1990s, when a historian tracing anomalies in German weapons production tracked a pattern of failures back to that factory in the Alps. She found Anna through a list of former forced laborers. When the historian asked to see her hands, Anna held them out. 70 years old, scarred from decades of engine work, but on the right thumb, a thin white line, a scar where a sliver of metal had been pressed into the skin, day after day, for 2 years. "That's my only medal," Anna said, and then she said something the historian never forgot. "Ask me how many I saved, and I'll answer with joy. Ask me how many I killed, and I won't sleep for a week." Her weapon was smaller than a grain of rice. Her war lasted 730 days, and the enemy she defeated never knew she existed. If this story stayed with you, there's another one waiting. A woman the Nazis dismissed because she couldn't hear. What they didn't know was that she could read their lips. That story is next.